Good afternoon, everyone, and good start. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's meeting of the Environment, Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee. First of all, can I, before doing the introductions, can I thank my predecessor, Deputy Provost Parrott, for his sterling work on this committee in the last 18 to 20 months, and I shall endeavour to follow in his footsteps. Can I introduce the top table first of all? My name is Councillor Eric Drysdale. I'm the new convener of this committee. On my far left is Councillor Jack Welsh, who is the vice convener and timekeeper for this afternoon. Then we have Barbara Renton, the Executive Director of Communities, to my left here, and on my right we have Adam Taylor of Committee Services and Scott Hendry, Democratic Services Manager. I will now ask the clerk to confirm any apologies received and to take a roll call of the members in attendance. Adam.
Thanks, convener. We have one apology this afternoon from Councillor Forbes, but we have Councillor Braun substituting. The majority of members are actually present in the chambers, but we do have 4 online. I'll just ask the 4 online to confirm whether they can hear us. Bailey?
Present, thank you.
Councillor Braun?
Yes, I'm here, Adam.
Councillor Kogali?
Yes, present, and I can hear you.
And Councillor Smith?
Yes, I'm here, I can hear you.
Okay.
Can I just check whether Councillor Harvey has joined? Okay, so Councillor Harvey is unable to, is not on the screens, but he is listening and can hear, and he is watching online. Okay, can I remind councillors and officers to use the chat box to attract my attention during the meeting, please? Item 2 on the agenda today, declarations of interest. Can I ask if there are any declarations of interest in respect of the business on the agenda today? I'm not getting anything online, nothing in the chamber, no declarations of interest. Thank you. Now moving on to deputations. First of all, can I ask the committee if they agree to hear the deputations on item 4 on the agenda today? Thank you.
Agreed.
I propose that under Standing Order 2.8, the committee suspend standing orders in relation to the deputations protocol for today's items of business due to the large number of requests received for a deputation to be made. I am proposing that deputations ideally would have 3 minutes to speak, but would urge people to be as succinct as possible and with a maximum of 5 minutes each. This being followed by time for any questions from members. Now, can I hand over to the clerk to take a vote on that proposal? Thank you.
Okay, thanks again, convener. So in line with Standing Order 2.8, we'll move to a roll call vote requiring 2/3 of the members present to agree to Councillor Drysdale's proposal. We have 15 members present, so that would be 10 required to agree. When I call your name, if you can advise whether you agree or disagree with the proposal. Councillor Anderson.
Disagree.
Bailey.
Disagree.
Councillor Braun.
Disagree.
Councillor Carr. Councillor Drysdale.
Agree.
Councillor Duff.
Disagree.
Councillor Harvey,
Councillor Harvey, if you can put on your verdict on the chat, please.
Councillor Harvey's indicated in the chat that he agrees. Councillor Kogali,
Disagree.
Councillor Lane,
Agree.
Bailey McLaren,
Agree.
Councillor Robertson,
Agree.
Councillor Smith,
Disagree.
Councillor Stewart,
Agree.
Councillor Welsh,
Agree.
and Bailey Williamson.
Agree.
We have 9 in agreement and 6 in disagreement. So as it's not met the required 10, the proposal will fail.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Therefore, deputations may be for a maximum of 10 minutes. And we will give appropriate instructions to each of the deputies as we move forward. Before moving to item 4 on the agenda, can we just cover item 3, please, which is the minute of the meeting of the Environment, Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee of 1st of November 2023. Can we agree the minute from our last meeting? Thank you. Okay, moving on, therefore, to the proposed limited waiting restrictions report, item 4. And first of all, can I ask Mr. Blair Watt, Project Officer in the Traffic and Network team, to introduce the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. The report details the statutory consultation process that the Traffic and Network team undertook that proposed introducing waiting restrictions. Oh, sorry. I'll just start again. The report details the statutory consultation process that the Traffic and Network team undertook that proposed introducing waiting restrictions in the Muirton area. Limited waiting restrictions were proposed on Harley Terrace, Harley Place, Muirton Bank.
Sorry, Blair, again.
Oh.
Right, just start again, Blair. Okay. Thanks. Cheers.
Third time lucky.
Aye.
The report details the statutory consultation process that the Traffic and Network team undertook that proposed introducing waiting restrictions in the Muirton area. Limited waiting restrictions were proposed on Harley Terrace, Harley Place, Muirton Bank and Florence Place. Waiting restrictions were also proposed on the access road leading to the North Inch. The restrictions were requested by a local elected member and the Community Council. The consultation received a large volume of correspondence, with the majority of responses objecting to the proposed restrictions. In total, 136 responses were received, with 102 objections, 22 responses in support, and 12 letters requesting similar restrictions on the other sections of Florence Place. The objections were received from residents of the listed streets, from surrounding streets, and also visitors to the area. The responses were discussed with 3 of the 4 Ward 12 elected members in order to agree a way forward. After considering the level of objections to the proposed restrictions on Muirton Bank and Florence Place, the councillors considered it was not appropriate. It was appropriate to withdraw the proposed restrictions from these 2 locations. However, due to the frequent access issues in Harley Place, Harley Terrace, and the access road to the North Inch, the members wished to proceed with the proposed restrictions. The report asked committee to consider the objections, note the Ward 12 elected members' recommendation, and set aside objections to allow the traffic regulation order to be made in part. Thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Blair, for your report and for the introduction. We move now to the deputations, and if I can address the deputies in the chamber collectively, please, at the start, which is that we'll now invite you in turn to come and speak at the podium there, and Councillor Welsh will assist in terms of the timing, where he will let you know when 9 minutes are up so that you can make any concluding comments, and obviously we will apply the 10-minute decision which has been made by committee. If I can ask you to be as concise as you can, there are 8 deputations today from with people with different opinions. Committee has had time to read all of the representations that have been made in response to the consultation, and if I can ask you just to make your points as clearly and as succinctly as you can. The microphone, which you'll see there, there's at the base there is a button to press, and the microphone will light up red, which means that your microphone is live. And if you can do that when you're either speaking, and if you're asked any questions by committee at the end of your deputation. So I'll hand over to Councillor Welsh to manage the process, but if I can just start by inviting Mr. Parsons to make his deputation, please.
Is that okay? Yeah.
It's just to confirm that you can speak for 10 minutes, but if possible, be as succinct as possible. You know, at the end of the day, just convey your message. I'll give you a 1 minute warning if you like at 9 minutes if you're speaking at that point, but otherwise just finish when you're happy to do so. Thank you.
Okay. My name's Les Parsons. I'd like to start by making my position clear. I'm a retired engineer and I've lived at the North Inch end of Florence Place for 27 years. I do not own the road outside of my house. Every day somebody will park there. Does it bother me? No. I object to the original proposed traffic regulation order. I support the subsequent report recommending that Florence Place and Muirton Bank be removed from the TRO, and support yellow lines being put at the end of the approach road from Muirton Cottages to the Inch. The only reason we're here discussing this TRO is because the Community Council told the Ward Councillor and Project Officer that there was community support for it. The responses from the community to the proposed TRO are overwhelmingly negative. On Florence Place, where the chair of the Community Council lives, 85% of respondents were against the proposal. Muirton Bank, 65%. Overall, of the residents directly affected by the proposal, 64% of the respondents objected. The Community Council, in my opinion, has misled the Ward Councillor and Project Officer by saying there is support when there clearly isn't. Moving on, the reasons given for parking in the area have been given as, firstly, to prevent obstructive parking. In the 27 years that I have lived on Florence Place, there has been only one occasion when I had difficulty exiting my drive. It's not an issue. Secondly, enhanced visibility at junctions. The junctions in the area had double yellow lines painted in 2016. This is not a valid reason, as it has already been successfully addressed by the council. Thirdly, improve road safety for all users. There's now a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit in the area. Enforcing this would have a far greater impact on road safety than a mass banning of parking. Reasons that supporters of the TRO have cited include abuse received when challenging parking. May I suggest that this works two ways, and that when a confrontational approach is taken when challenging parking, it's bound to provoke a response from some people. Abandoned cars with no MOT or tax. This is not something that I've seen in the area, but if it does happen, they can be reported by the council's website, the DVLA and HMRC. A procedure is then followed to remove them. This situation will not be changed by a yellow line. The last one I find amazing. The area is being used for free parking by commuters. Well, people wanting to save a bit of money and walk through a beautiful park to improve their health are being vilified by supporters of this TRO. It's not against the law to walk into work. Terminating the free parking will have consequences for many. Just a few of these reasons are, it will severely limit household parking options. Some in the proposed area have no off-road parking at all. Some residents have also been told that free parking permits will be made available. Now, it's been confirmed to me by Mr. Watt that Perth and Kinross councils do not provide residents parking permits unless in a controlled area, and they're certainly not free. It will limit friends and relatives from visiting or staying over. It will inhibit tradesmen and healthcare workers carrying out their job. It will abolish the easy parking availability for parents and children visiting the play park. It will limit unrestricted parking options for North Inch sporting and cultural events, including the golf club, park run, bowling and rugby clubs. It will push more cars to park on Hay Street and Muirton Place, both of which are narrower than Florence Place and far more congested. Finally, the paving over of front gardens to provide additional parking for residents will inevitably lead to more runoff into the drains, destruction of wildlife habitats and loss of biodiversity. I have a 30-year-old heatherbank in my front garden that will go. It's full of bees and wildlife in the summer, and the community council quite liked it, but then they come back and say, well, we're going to want yellow lines, you're going to have to get rid of it. To summarise, Florence Place and Muirton Bank do not have a parking or road safety problem. I support the report which recommends that Florence Place and Muirton Bank be removed from the TRO and support yellow lines being put at the end of the approach road from Muirton Cottages to the Inch. Briefly, with regard to Harley Terrace and Harley Place, I believe the residents should be supplied with the facts, particularly concerning parking permits, before any further action is taken. This should be carried out by council officials, and the community council should play no part in this.
Thank you for your delegation. That's appreciated. Mr. Parsons.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Parsons. If you would care to just stay there in case there are any questions, if you're happy to answer these. Yeah, I think a few of us are. If yourself and future speakers can go as close as you can to the microphone, that does, I think, help the acoustics. But yeah, it is a bit of a challenge. So, are there any questions for Mr. Parsons and Councillor Stewart?
Thank you, Convener. Thank you for your deputation, Mr. Parsons. I wondered, just because you brought it up as a topic, what your feeling would be towards permit-controlled parking areas in the types of streets that we're talking about just now.
No need for it. Simple as that. It's unnecessary. There's plenty of parking space in Florence Place every day of the week. Muirton Bank, there's parking spaces at Muirton Bank every day of the week. If you close those off, people will just move elsewhere. And what, you know, I looked up, it costs about a couple of £100 per vehicle for a parking permit. I've got 2 vehicles. Why, when there's no need for it, do I have to pay £400? And then when residents come, presumably, when visitors come, presumably you need a ticket for them at a price per visit. I mean, I've seen these elsewhere. So yeah, they don't come for free. I can understand it in some reasons, in some areas where it's metered parking, and that makes sense. But here, I mean, Florence Place, you can put 4 cars across it. There is no issue there. There's no issue with parking whatsoever.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Parsons. There don't appear to be any further questions at this time. Thank you. Can I now ask Mr. Allen to come forward, please? Good afternoon, Mr. Allen. Yep.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me all? Yes. I'm very briefly, Les has covered, or Mr. Parsons covered a great lot of things that I wanted to say. And all I can say is I was, I've been 40 odd years in Florence Place now. I was 25 years in the fire brigade, and I can honestly say that in that time, I've never had a problem with parking, i.e. whether in my job or as a householder. The size of the road, it's not a problem at all. It's not a problem. Even going back to, I go back to when Muirton Park was on the go. Anybody know Muirton Park? An old chap over here, yeah. Yeah, Muirton Park. And the buses used to come to Florence Place and park. Not a problem, not a problem. And all of a sudden, they've suddenly realised, oh, we must do something about Florence Place and Muirton Bank. But there is no need. Now, I can't speak for, I know, again, from my fire brigade experience, Harley Place, Harley Terrace did have a slight problem. The width of the road for a start is 13 feet, approximately 13 feet. A fire engine or a fire appliance is almost 10 feet. An average car is 5 feet. And we're not talking about these big super duper cars. We're talking about family cars. So you don't need to be a rocket science to work out that it's kind of tight. And people say, oh, you can go up in the pavements. What if there's bins on the pavement? Well, again, from the fire brigade point of view, if there's a fire and there's persons reported, speed is of the essence. You must get there. You've got time to move bins or move cars, go up on pavements. So as I said, I'm only speaking briefly and I'm saying what I think, and that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Allen. And once again, if would you be able to answer any questions if committee has any?
Of course, yes.
Are there any questions for Mr. Allen? Bailey Williamson.
Sorry.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Okay. And you were just saying there are you suggesting we should maybe just focus on Harley Place, which is where a potential problem is because of the narrowness of the road? And
I can't see, I think it's up to the people of Harley Place, Harley Terrace. I'm only saying what I saw and what I've seen in the past. But I am quite passionate about, obviously, Florence Place and Muirton Bank. So I think the people from Harley Place or Harley Terrace should have their say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There do not appear to be any further questions. So once again, Mr. Allen, thank you for your deputation. And I now invite Dr. LeBeau to make his deputation, please.
How's that? Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for allowing us to talk. I'm actually speaking on behalf of Mr. Paul Freeman, who lives on Muirton Bank. I'm a neighbour of his, and I share his views entirely. We live, Paul certainly lives in an older house with no garden, no parking at all. And he and his wife both have positions of some importance with the NHS. In fact, it's a computer failure today which has caused Paul not to be here. And they're both family people, and this they, like myself, have objected because this proposal would obviously ban us from parking outside our houses. And when you have no alternatives to where to park, as Mr. Freeman has, this is a major problem. And what it would mean, of course, is that it would mean that we would now have to go and park on somebody else's road. And as I'm sure you're fully aware, that residents of neighbouring roads have already objected because this is, whatever the situation would happen, would be moved farther along. Mr. Parsons has covered a large amount of stuff that I've got written on my paper here. So perhaps if I just give a personal view of my case specifically. We have 3 cars, 3 vehicles in our house because my daughter, who is a foster mother, and she has children under 2s, she's allowed to take, and she has 2 or 3 of these. And obviously she has all sorts of equipment and paraphernalia to drop off. And we regularly get visits from sometimes the social workers, but regular visits from health workers and so forth. And the thought of them having to park 200 or 300 yards away because they can't park outside the house. As for my wife and myself, we're both, as you can see, aging, both mentally and physically. And we both have walking difficulties on occasions. I know with my lung disease that I certainly can't walk 200 yards, and it's only going to get worse. So this proposal would be really poor, really bad for us. And we also have fears that all the people, the myriad of people who help us with our gardening, with our odd jobs, the people who are already doing quite a bit of caring for us and cleaning and so forth, they may not be able to come, and they may stop coming because of transporting equipment some distance to our house. We also have church groups and U3A group meetings at our house, and the thought of having people having to walk all that distance, certainly all these people tend to be elderly as well as the demographics of our particular neighbourhood is likewise. So I won't bore you with all the other things that I've got on here because they've already been well covered by Les Parsons, and your time is valuable. I'm aware of that.
Thank you very much, Dr. LeBeau, for your deputation. And again, can I ask if you're prepared to answer questions from committee? I do have one at the moment, which is from Councillor Smith, who is online. So just keep your microphone on. You'll be able to answer when he asks. Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much, Convener. The question I would have to Doctor is, in all the time that you've lived there, have you ever witnessed a car accident involving pedestrians or between 2 motor vehicles? Thank you.
I've never witnessed any accidents at all, and I've never had any problem with cars parking outside our house. We've only lived here 3 years, and we came here for the attractions of the area, obviously, and to be close to the family, which is the main thing. But I think the key thing that I'd like to get over is that in all that 3 years, we have never had a single issue of anybody parking outside. And we've also become quite friendly with the people from whom we bought the house, who lived there for 32 years. And they have told us about one incident when their house, they couldn't get their car out of the house when they wanted to go, which was awkward for them. But then they told us that the following day, the lady who had actually blocked their drive arrived with an apology, a cheque to pay for their taxi, and a big bunch of flowers. So we certainly don't see it as a problem.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you again. There does not appear to be any further questions, so thank you for your time again. Thank you. Okay, now move on to Mr. Rimmer. If I can ask Mr. Rimmer to come forward and make his deputation. Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Rimmer. As Chair of North Inch and Muirton Community Council from 2019 to 2020, I led moves to resolve parking issues in these streets after double yellows had been installed at junctions in 2016. I support the proposal to not put yellow lines in Florence Place and Muirton Bank. Data pre and post COVID that I have amassed, covering over 600 days, proves that parked vehicle numbers are 23% down in Muirton Place and Florence Place, and on less than 3% of days, Muirton Place was full. Now, I mentioned Muirton Place because that was originally part of the proposal from the Community Council, but it is also the most heavily congested street in that particular area. Difficulties parking in a street or non-residents parking across or close to driveways can hardly exist when there are now plenty of spaces to park responsibly. It will happen occasionally, I dare say. I oppose yellow lines in Harley Place and Harley Terrace. Refuse vehicles always pass parked vehicles in these streets, and bins have always been collected. Photographs of proof supplied to Ward 12 councillors and council officers are not shown in the appendix, but hopefully they will confirm that they have been provided. I witnessed on Saturday morning a refuse vehicle reversing down both Harley Place and Harley Terrace, past parked vehicles in both streets. Parked vehicles blocking driveways on these narrow streets has occurred very infrequently, but if action is taken based on infrequent problems, you might as well paint yellow lines in every street of Perth and Kinross. An alternative solution, allowing vehicles to park responsibly without blocking driveways, is possible. Please have council officers investigate this, disclose and consult properly with residents before implementing. In early 2022, North Inch and Muirton Community Council instigated this process for the 4th time in 8 years for the streets where they live. They selfishly targeted non-residents wishing to access the North Inch or commuters seeking free parking by requesting time-limited parking. It was a selfish attempt to push the problem to neighbouring streets. They irresponsibly went into solution mode and announced free resident permits, allowing residents to behave as if they owned the street by determining who, when and for how long people could park. And what greater proof is there of a community council pursuing its own agenda and not representing the community than one which continues to support yellow lines despite the vast majority of residents in their own streets being opposed? North Inch and Muirton Community Council only represent themselves. I would like to state that the compiler of this report, Blair Watt, has behaved in a completely professional manner throughout. However, from beginning to end, the process to produce this report is flawed. This antithesis of problem solving has serious implications as to how PKC is seen to be doing things and how public money is wasted. No one has asked, what is the problem we are trying to solve? How do you solve a problem if you don't know what it is? Consultation solely by a 5 by 7 inch note on a few lampposts may tick a box of the statutory legal minimum of consulting, but back in the real world, that is totally inadequate. Nothing without us is for us. Ward councillors who live elsewhere making decisions based on unsubstantiated lived experience for the sake of being seen to do something, whether it's necessary or not. No evidence gathering or site visits to confirm or deny contradictory opinions expressed by residents. Large numbers of non-residents' views completely ignored. Proposals that move the problem somewhere else. Suggestions that council officers will evaluate the effects of the yellow lines are tosh. It's never happened before, and in 20 months, not one day's data has been produced. If yellow lines go ahead, and this highly questionable process and lack of problem solving is repeated elsewhere, and I know it has many times, we as residents you make decisions on behalf of are frankly screwed. It would mean wasting vast amounts of public time, resource and money on problems that don't exist, ignoring problems that do, pushing problems elsewhere, solving one problem by creating another, and incorrectly applying learnings elsewhere. To some, putting yellow lines in a couple of cul-de-sacs may not appear a big deal, but the implications and what's at stake are massive.
Thank you, Mr. Rimmer. Thank you for your deputation. And once again, can I invite colleagues on the committee to indicate if they have any questions for you, if you're happy to answer these. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, convener. My chat function isn't working, unfortunately. Thanks for your presentation, Mr. Rimmer. I just wondered if this matter has been discussed at the Community Council in recent times, and whether you've been and raised your comments and concerns at the Community Council meetings, and whether there's been a similar crowd of people have come along to these meetings to voice their opinions.
Don't know to the first point about whether it's been discussed at Community Council meetings. The last one that I went to had about 5 or 6 members of the public attending that. The relations that I have with some of the Community Council at the minute are, to put it bluntly, frosty. Okay. Sorry, the second part of your question? I obviously don't know. No.
Sorry, Councillor Duff, that your microphone wasn't on there. If you could just repeat that.
Sorry, I just wondered if other people had attended Community Council meetings to speak on this subject, whether it had actually been on the agenda for these meetings, I suppose, as well. Thank you.
What I could say on that is there has been absolutely nothing on the Community Council's main means of communication with residents, which is their Facebook page, nothing at all on this subject, ever.
Thank you. Leader of the Council, Councillor Lang. Thank you.
Thanks, and thanks for your presentation. Just a couple of points. How did the present Community Council, how have they managed to achieve a consultation of members of residents of their area before they've driven this forward? Because obviously if you're going to bring something forward such as this, you would expect the Community Council to have done some consultation previously. So that's the first question. And why do you think this is the 4th time in 8 years that this subjects cropped up in this area?
I'm no longer on the Community Council. I left at the start of COVID. Why? It's always a mystery to me that the current Community Council have not done any information gathering in terms of, for example, data to demonstrate the regularity of particular problems in this. When I was the chair of the Community Council, which would have been the 3rd one of the incidents, we didn't actually end up, we didn't have time to get to particular proposals. What I had initiated at that point, and it was agreed with the residents of Harley Place, Harley Terrace, Florence Place, Muirton Place, etc., was that we would have a joint meetings, if you like, with the ward councillors, the council officers, the community council and the community, and we would work through what the available options were, having gathered data to demonstrate things, and then come up with a joint approach that worked for everybody, but which would not be pushing the problem somewhere else. But of course, COVID came along and that scuppered all that. So exactly what the community council have been doing to gather information, it's a mystery to me. What they have gone and done, though, is issued 2 letters in early 2022, which is where they notified residents of their proposal for yellow lines in all these streets, including Muirton Place, which has now been forgotten, and also that they had asked for permits. They never at any point mentioned to anybody that they were not going to get permits, and they should have known they weren't going to get them, because that was part of the first proposal in 2016 that was rejected by council officers.
Okay, thanks very much, and thanks, Mr. Parsons, I think it was there. Thank you.
Thank you. There do not appear to be any further questions, Mr. Rimmer, so thank you for your deputation. Okay, we're now moving on. Can I invite Mr. Kennedy to come forward and make his deputation, please? Good afternoon, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you for inviting me along today. I would just like to say that I'm quite new to Florence Place. I've only been there about 26 years. They talk about cars. I'm just going to bring 2 or 3 points that affect me deeply. Speeding. It's quite incredible the speed they go along there at all hours of the night. Other one is parking across my drive. I have lymphoma cancer, and on 2 occasions I've never made it to 9 Wells. I've pointed it to the police. I've got a number if you want to check it up. It's not a problem. Mr. Rimmer, if you don't mind me saying, stays in Balhousie Street. He seems to have a very keen interest in Florence Place. I don't know why, but he's not there all the time. What I have outside my house is I have a neighbour here and a neighbour here. So in the middle, I have a designated parking place for 2 cars that can park on the road quite comfortably. I've not really got an issue with that. But if you get somebody coming along and they park in the middle of that bay, it leaves 2 cars coming in with their tail sticking into my drive and my neighbours. So at the very least, I would like some kind of line at my property, and I think everybody should get that across their their driveway. These are the points that I know about. And I'm for the yellow lines, obviously, but if I can't get that, I want something to protect my drive and others as well.
Understood. Thank you. Again, are you able to answer any questions if committee has these?
Yeah, if I can.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any questions? Don't appear to be. Oh, there is Councillor Stewart.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks, convener. And thanks very much for your deputation for coming along. It's important that we hear a range of views. I just wondered, the last deputy had indicated that there had been post-COVID more people working from home, presumably, a decrease in the number of parked cars in the streets affected. And I just wondered what your experience was of there being fewer cars parked and therefore more availability of spaces.
when the COVID was on, it was a blessing in a way. But then there's a lot of people who work in the town and they park there. I would park there as well, I suppose, in all fairness. But what I wouldn't do is I wouldn't park in front of somebody's drive. And that's all I can say to you.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Councillor Duff.
Sorry, that's just obviously what we're looking at today in particular is the yellow lines within the two forget the names of the streets now. The two streets at the far end, Harley Terrace and Harley Place. And if there were restrictions on parking in that area, do you think the issue would be a significant one for moving traffic into other streets around about it?
Almost certainly it would get worse if they would. Although I agree, I would like the lines in Florence as I've commented on, but Harley Place and Merton Bank, I would say would need yellow lines, because there will be a huge influx into Florence Place if nothing's done. It will be like before COVID, which is really bad. If you've got somebody coming to your home or that, or dropping anybody off, they've got to stop in the middle of the road, and it's not acceptable. It's a big wide road, but it's not nice, and you've got to live there to really appreciate how frustrating it is. That's my point on it.
Thank you. We do have another question now from Councillor Lane.
Thanks, and thanks for your presentation. As Councillor Stewart said, we've got to hear a range of views, but it was interesting what you said there, that if we go with the officer's proposal to put in Harley Place and Harley Terrace, that would actually make it worse in your neck of the woods. Can you accept that if we did everything in the original plan, that's going to make it very much worse elsewhere in the town or in the neighbouring area?
It's going to make it worse, but it's up to the council to try and do something about it. Can you not get some kind of car parking, a section of, I don't know, near the Inch or something, where you could park? The Bell Sports Centre's a bit of a disaster now. That'll be getting knocked down, is it not? I believe. You get plenty of cars in there. There's not so much people coming to the street now because Bell's has been flooded.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kennedy. I don't think there are any more questions. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Okay, now can I invite Mr. Fitzpatrick to come and make his deputation, please? He's all right. Okay, Mr. Fitzpatrick has not dialed in. If you're listening to this, Mr. Fitzpatrick, can you dial in on the number you were given, and I will take you after the final deputation, which I have on my list now, which is Mr. Manson. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Drysdale, Chair, for giving me the opportunity to talk here today. I'm going to try and not personalise my comments in any way, if at all possible. I've been a resident of Muirton Bank for 15 years. I'm probably one of the youngest, to be honest. The age population of many of the people I know on the street is in the high 70s, 80s bracket. As a consequence, those people, fact not myth, have been subjected to abuse on various occasions when their access and egress to their properties is compromised by people that just park there. I'm not saying they park illegally, because they can't park illegally because there's no restrictions currently. You can obviously detect I'm a supporter of the proposals. Maybe not this proposal. I think the first letter I received was the 9th of December 2015 from Mr. Duncan in Perth and Kinross regarding this. And it's just rumbled on and rumbled on and rumbled on with various solutions. None of them seem to be agreed upon, and I'm not quite sure whether today's one's agreed upon either. With that in mind, I'm working on the assumption that people in this room representing the council are subjected to the same rules as the people that represent us in the Scottish Parliament. I've listened to all these debates about the recording of minutes, actions, etc., etc., and my assumption is that the people making the decisions around this proposal are also subjected to those same rules. With that in mind, I don't see a document that shows the discussion and the logic behind the decision making on the current proposal. So why were 2 streets cut out and 2 streets remain in? Why was 10 metres in Mantsbrae, the access road to the inch, included in the proposal? We don't see the transparency behind the conversation and the decision and the notes of that decision making. So I would ask if that's possible to see that from the people who made the decision. Can that be made possible to be shared with the people who have a concern? Excuse me, there's no cups for water. We've also got 4 streets in question that have different characteristics. For example, somebody's spoken about 4 cars in Florence Place. Well, that's true because it's 8.4 metres from kerb to kerb. So you can actually have 2 cars parked and plenty access up the middle for another 2 cars if people drive carefully. No problem for service vehicles. The gentleman talked about fire service, for them to get through. So Florence Place at 8.4 kerb to kerb doesn't really have access egress problems. People can come out their drives if there's a car parked opposite it without really too much trouble. Harley Place, the other extreme at 4.3 metres kerb to kerb, it would be an absolute nightmare. If I lived in Harley and somebody was parked opposite my drive, I would find it extremely difficult to get out of my property. Muirton Bank is actually the one I live in at 6.2 metres. So if somebody is parked opposite your drive, you need 3 goes to reverse into your drive if somebody's parked opposite. And the 4th one, Mantsbrae, is 7.7 metres. So if you actually ever experience Mantsbrae, there's 2 cars parked either side and people can come up and down. The middle, they can do 3-point turns and get out. So there are different characteristics for these 4 streets in question. But my experience of Muirton Bank and the parking does cause access egress issues. And if I then turn to the data that we have in the council's report, the objections, I think it was noted that in some occasions, multiple people from the same household had objected to the proposals. I don't see the opposite side of the equation to say on the people that supported it, it was either single or multiple proposal supporters from the same household. I would doubt it. So I think we have a disproportionate skew in the data, but legally you said you had to accept these as objections. So the other piece of data that I don't see is the consultation with the fire services, the police services, ambulance services, etc., and experiences that they've had on these streets. I personally have had to call the police twice in 2023 for problems accessing and egressing my particular property. I can give you the police incident numbers if you would like, but the police's general response to this is it's a council problem and they don't really want to get involved. So here we are, well, 8 years since the original communication from, I think it was Mr. Duncan. I don't think we're any further forward. And I think we need a different approach. I think there's hybrid solutions that could be considered that give win-win solutions here. I don't fully understand the parking permit, no parking permit, free permit, pay for a permit, but if we look around the rest of our country, Scotland, parking permits exist in many other cities and towns. So there must be something we can learn from those cities that could possibly be implemented that would satisfy people. Because many of the objections is about, what if my friends come? What if a tradesman comes? What if my carer comes? So are we saying that we cannot find solutions to those objections and find a win-win solution for all people concerned, not just those who object or those who support? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manson. Thank you for your deputation. Again, are you prepared to answer any questions committee may have?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Manson? There don't appear to be any questions for you, sir, so thank you for your deputation. Oh, sorry, just a wee bit too quick there. Bailey Williamson, first of all.
Sorry about that, Convener. It takes a bit of time for the electronics to work from me to you. It's just a question really about the, do you have any anecdotal evidence of wing mirrors getting broken on any of these streets that have been proposed?
Have I personally got the data? Well, I'm not part of the... No, I do not have that data. I'm not part of the community council. I'm just a resident here to support myself and indeed some of my elderly friends who live on the street. Sorry. I think there's many pieces of data that should be sought and analysed in a different way to either support or reject this proposal that I don't see.
No, you can't. Councillor Smith, can you hear me?
I certainly can now. I couldn't before, but I can now.
Excellent. That'll be because I pressed the button. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. And thank you for that deputation, Mr. Manson. And you know exactly who's speaking to you here. Have you had, I know you've had a lot of incidents regarding trying to get out your driveway, etc. How often does you get traffic wardens along there? And do you see a problem in the sense that there will be a lot of school children going along there? And have you found that when there's a lot of parking there could be a real problem with safety? Thank you.
The first question regarding traffic wardens or any parking attendants, then there's no real need for that, to be honest, because there's nothing for them to enforce in those streets because there's no restrictions currently. So I could probably say I've never seen anybody representing that sort of job function there in the 15 years I've lived in Muirton Bank. Safety, I think the pavements could obviously do with being repaired, but most of the school children that are going to school tend to walk on the pavements. So no real safety issues for pedestrians because there's pavements on both sides, certainly of Muirton Bank.
My question regarding the traffic wardens was that I do know of people who are parking across your driveway, and you've obviously called the police. I would have thought the traffic warden would have been there to help you in any way. Do you never request anyone like that?
Actually, both instances were, one instance was a Saturday, and just to put this into perspective, I have a motorhome which is 7.5 metres long. I've already said the curb to curb width is 6.2 metres in Muirton Bank, so it's quite a challenge to get the motorhome out of my property and onto the street. I think the councillors for my ward obviously know about that because I've written to them previously about that issue. No, the police were called twice. Police came once because the car had no MOT or insurance on it, so they were quite happy to intervene and get the car taken away. On the second occasion, the police were not as active and basically said there wasn't a huge amount they could have done. Of course, it was a recorded incident, but they referred me back to the council to find a solution to the problem.
Thank you very much, and I'll say John. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we have another question now from Councillor Welsh.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Manson. It's more of a clarification of the question, but I think it is a question. I think you mentioned once in your deputation that you're not a supporter of this proposal, and you also said it needs a different approach. I'm taking it from that you feel as though this is not really going to properly help what you need, what you think is the issue.
Well, I think the point, can I just say, I think the point's already been made that all we're doing here is kicking a can down the road. So if you put in restrictions on Harley, it's definitely going to exacerbate the current issues in Muirton Bank. So I'm kind of not totally supporting the proposal, even though Harley has got a 4.3 metre curb width. It's a nightmare. I can imagine worse than Muirton Bank if you lived there. Part of Muirton Bank and indeed Harley, there's a lot of properties who have a drive, but a drive opposite. So nobody will park in the drive opposite. So quite a lot of the properties you can access and egress your property with no problem because nobody's going to park because there's a drive completely opposite you. But there are a lot of the properties there isn't a drive opposite, and those are the ones that are experiencing the problems accessing and egressing their problems. So therefore, my hybrid proposal would be, why don't we have some yellow lines but not all yellow lines on the street? And the yellow lines would help those residents that do not have a drive opposite them, but do have an access and egress issue. Does that answer you?
It helps with a bit of clarification. Thank you. Yep.
Can I just then ask finally, at the outset, I talked about the decision-making logic that put this current proposal on the table and the notes of the minute or the minutes of that meeting that support that decision. Are they going to be made available?
Mr. Manson, if I can just say that your role in this process is the deputation that you have given. We've heard what you've got to say. It may be that elected members may ask questions of officers after these deputations have taken place. It's up to the elected members to decide what the questions are, but they've heard what you've got to say.
Okay, sorry, Chair.
Thank you. There do not appear to be any further questions at the moment, so thank you for your deputation. Now, I believe we still don't have Mr. Fitzpatrick on the phone, and just to give further time for him to make his telephone appearance, there was an 8th deputation, Mr. Grossi, who unfortunately cannot make it today. and I understand that there is a letter from Mr. Grossi, which Mr. Rimmer has kindly agreed to read out. There will not be any questions to Mr. Rimmer on this, simply to read out the letter. Thank you, Mr. Rimmer.
Thank you. My name is Steve Grossi. I used to be called Steve Rimmer. Mr. Grossi has lived at the North Inch end of Harley Place for many years. I would like to speak in objection to the proposal to impose parking restrictions on Harley Place and Harley Terrace. The grounds of my objection are that the original consultation was flawed in that it was not communicated to all affected residents, i.e. the notice was not placed on any of the lampposts in Harley Place or Harley Terrace, and many people could not access the proposal online. It is surely a requirement that all affected streets have the notice posted. There was then no actual consultation where the questions posed in the response letters were discussed with the residents. The amended proposal for the Harleys only has not been consulted in any manner at all, none whatsoever, and surely cannot be passed without any consultation. An example of what may have come up in consultation, if it had been offered, would be to ask, if the need for these restrictions is to prevent emergency and service vehicles from being blocked, then why do the restrictions only apply from 8 AM to 6 PM? Do emergencies only occur at these times? The lack of clarity and consultation has led to the residents of Harley Place and Terrace being informed through the Community Council that the Harley Place and Terrace residents are receiving parking permits and that doctors, carers and tradesmen will be allowed to override the parking restrictions. This has completely misled all residents, who will then be shocked when the truth is revealed. There has been no study of the traffic to support the proposal. Surely an analysis of the traffic and parking by the council is required. My own study and photographic evidence shared with the elected members suggests that there are no parking or access issues. Residents' discussions with the actual refuse collection team confirmed that they had no complaint over access. In short, the original proposal consultation was flawed. There has been absolutely no consultation on the revised proposal, a tale of misinformation and confusion, and no substantive review of the suggested parking issue. The proposal should be set aside pending true consultation and a traffic review.
Thank you, Mr. Rimmer, and thank you for reading out Mr. Grossi's letter. I'll make one final attempt to see whether Mr. Fitzpatrick has made contact by telephone, and I'm being told no, there has been no contact at all. Bill. So, okay. I understand from Bailey Ahern that Mr. Fitzpatrick's telephone is constantly engaged. So at the moment, there's nothing we can do about it. He does not have he has not had the opportunity to state his case. We're about to move on to officer questions. I think exceptionally, if he does make contact after that, then we can, or during that process, we can then listen to Mr. Fitzpatrick, but then the opportunity will have been lost after that. So I now want to move on, first of all, thanking all the deputies for their comments and for being prepared to answer questions on what is clearly an emotive topic for many people. I'm now moving on to officer questions from elected members. The following officers are in attendance: Mr. Blair Watt, whom we've heard from, who's the project officer, and Mr. Brian Cargill, the traffic and network services manager. So do we have any questions, please? And we have Bailey, first of all, online. Alistair.
Thank you, Convener. I'm looking at the data table on page 14 of the report, which presents the responses to the traffic regulation order as a sort of like a kind of mini local referendum in a way. However, I'm a bit concerned about that presentation because the usual traffic regulation order letter or the signs on the lampposts, they really only invite people to contact the council if they object to the thing that's proposed. They don't usually explicitly say, please also write to us if you support, and then we will present the results as if it was a mini referendum. So wondered if officers have any reflection on that and if they can confirm whether it was a standard letter that really only invites objections or whether it was a communication that made it clear that supporting comments should also be submitted. I'm just worried about which side we may have motivated the most in our notices. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cargill.
Yeah, all our correspondence when we advertise a TRO it requests comments either for or against. It doesn't stipulate just to comment if you're against a proposal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like me to come back separately with my other one, Convener, or shall I fire into that one now?
Just carry on, actually, Alistair. You
Okay.
might as well. Yeah.
Thank you. One of the deputies mentioned difficulty in getting Police Scotland to attend or take care in cases when their driveway is blocked, and they didn't specify whether that was for entrance or exit to their driveway. I thought that was a Police Scotland matter and that council enforcement are unable to enforce that, although we do have it within our powers, obviously, to apply restrictions which you can then enforce. Is my understanding correct, or does PKC have powers we can use when a driveway is blocked? Thank you.
Mr. Cargill.
Thanks, Bailey. Yes, you're absolutely correct with that. I think it was mentioned in one of the deputations about traffic wardens coming out to enforce that, but that is actually a matter for Police Scotland. If somebody's blocked in their driveway or blocked and can't get into their driveway, it would be Police Scotland who deal with that, not the council.
Okay, thank you. As a brief follow-up, if I may, do we have any information as to whether that is official Police Scotland policy, or is it potentially that their volumes on a particular day mean they can't attend to that because they're dealing with things that are more life and death? So I guess the question is, and I may need to direct this to the police via freedom of information, is it an overall policy that they don't enforce that regulation, or do we think it's just because of operational crunch times?
Mr. Cargill.
Yeah, I think you would be correct with that. I think we obviously can't comment on behalf of Police Scotland, but I would suspect it would be due to their resources and other priorities, whether they would be in a position to attend or not.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Convener.
Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Convener. Can I ask the officers if there was any other options considered when they were writing this report?
Again, Mr. Cargill.
Yeah, at the outset, well, it seems we've visited this request on a number of times over many years, and it was sitting dormant for a long period of time. But we were led to believe that there was community support. So the initial proposals was based on what we were led to believe was acceptable to the community. However, very quickly through the consultation process, it was clear that that wasn't what the community necessarily wanted, and it was at a meeting with the local members that it was agreed that the revised proposals would be put forward, and we were under the impression again at that point that this would be acceptable to the community.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Convener. Bailey helpfully asked one of the two questions I wanted to ask, but helpfully I've got a reserved question. First of all, one of the things that we have spoken about in our ward road safety meetings is that actually where you have parked traffic on small narrow roads, it slows the speed of the traffic. So
to ask officers, if we put double yellow lines in, particularly on the long one, which I think is Muirton Bank, or indeed on the through road, which is Florence Place, is there a risk that traffic will speed up in a quiet residential area?
Mr. Cargill.
Yes, Councillor, I think you have picked that up obviously from our discussions in the past. I think it depends on the location, and in this situation it could be viewed in Muirton Bank then if we remove some on-street parking, then potentially vehicle speeds could go up. But I think all the other streets that we're considering today, I don't think there's any major issues if we did remove vehicles. And you're absolutely right, it's probably the cheapest form of traffic calming that we can provide is on-street parking.
Thanks very much. I can dispense with my reserve question, so that's all me done. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, I got a message there which I just missed. So Councillor Harvey, you've withdrawn your question.
Yeah, so Councillor Stewart already asked. Thanks.
Okay, so Councillor Braun, please.
Thank you, convener. As a passing voice, I may just congratulate you on your appointment as convener. My question is a simple one, and it's to do with parking permits. This came up in objectors mentioned this. We don't, for some reason, operate any sort of parking permit scheme, and I just wondered why that is. It's come up in my ward before, and I just wonder, is there a reason why we don't operate this? No, other authorities do, but is there some main reason why we don't do it ourselves?
And Mr. Cargill again, thanks.
Yeah, there's a couple of answers to that. I think it's, if we get it into context, I think compared to the issues that Edinburgh City or Glasgow City or some of the cities down south will have, where parking permits for residents is quite common. I think the reality is, and we're very fortunate, I would say, that we don't have that level of issue on some of the streets in Perth and our outlying boroughs. However, it has been raised on a number of occasions over many years, and when it has been considered, the cost of actually implementing and then thereafter enforcing and managing such a scheme, when it's relayed to those who've requested it, that potentially there would be cost implications for those who've requested it. It has become cost prohibitive, and it really doesn't go past that stage. What I would say is that as part of the mobility strategy, we're working with our transportation colleagues, and we're looking at the parking policy for Perth and Kinross. And I think that gives us the opportunity to look at everything right across the board, including the potential for residents' parking permits. What we do have in Perth itself is the residents' parking permits for those who stay in the immediate vicinity of the city centre, and that permit allows them to park in one of the council's public car parks. It doesn't guarantee them a space, but it does give them the ability to park, and they pay a one-off fee over the course of that year. And I dare say, if you do stay in the city centre, you will feel that there's value in paying such a lump sum, which I think is in the region of about £250 or so. So it's something that we will consider going forward in the coming year with regards to parking policy. But as it stands just now, we don't have a residence parking permit scheme in any of the boroughs or Perth City itself.
Fine. Thank you for that. Thanks, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Braun. Thank you for your kind comments. And we have Councillor Duff with a further question. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. As I said, I've not got access to my chat function. I have two questions, and excuse me, you can come back to me whenever it's appropriate for the second one. But okay, thank you. My first question was to ask officers. We've heard comments about waste services being able to deliver and emergency services. Have there been any complaints, or what you want to call them, or comments from our waste services, from police, fire or ambulance, about the inability to use these roads at any particular time, and whether bins have not been uplifted because of parked vehicles? That's my first question. Thank you.
Mr. Cargill.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor, for that question. The answer to that is that we have consulted both with our waste services colleagues and with all the emergency services, and there has been no reports from either of these parties with regards to them having any issues with access or egress.
Okay, thank you. Just second question. Yeah, it's okay. In relation to the proposals for Harley Place, Harley Terrace, how many vehicles roughly would, if they were properly parked, would it displace from these two streets? And could you just confirm the second part of that was that blue badge users would still be able to park in these streets? Thank you.
Again, Mr. Cargill.
Yeah, we don't have the information to that extent as to how many vehicles you would displace. But we're not talking about huge numbers here, and they could easily be accommodated on surrounding streets. Muirton Bank obviously is the street that I would imagine they would migrate to. With regards to blue badge holders, yes, the answer is that they can park on waiting restrictions, but once again, they would need to park in a manner that they're not causing obstruction.
Okay, are there any further questions? There do not appear. Oh, Councillor Stewart Smith, sorry. I'm not getting that yet. Okay, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. My question would be, Mr. Manson actually touched on it when you had his deputation there, was that surely we can come to some compromise. There must be some way that we can have certain yellow lines in certain places. I'm sure you've examined that, but surely that must be feasible in some way or other to stop it, to try and get some sort of compromise. Thank you.
Your response to that question? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor, for that question. The answer to that question is yes, we can look again, but we've looked at a number of things over many years, and clearly from a staff resource point of view, it's taking up a lot of officer time. However, we would be more than happy to consider other options if there were options that could be agreeable to the community, but what those are, we thought we were actually in a position where we had an agreed project to take forward. That has been revised. We thought this was agreed, but if it is the want of committee for us to look at something else, then that could be done. But what that is at this point, I couldn't say.
Thank you. Councillor Duff, you have a further question.
It was just to ask the officers to clarify that there is a process by which residents can partially sort of protect their entrances to the driveways by requesting the use of I think it's called an H-bar or whatever, across the driveway. I appreciate there is a cost to this, but if they could just confirm that process is open to residents. Thank you.
Mr. Cargill.
Thanks, Councillor. Yes, that is certainly an option that is available. Historically, we have provided ditch markings in the past, where residents have experienced issues or problems with, in the main, it's exiting their driveway, as opposed to not getting back into their driveway. Usually, the bigger issue is that they're going to a hospital appointment or doctor's appointment or whatever it may be, and the bigger issue is not being able to get out. In the past, we have provided what you've described as being an itch marking, and there is a cost to that to the resident. Our experience over the years is that if the problem is significant, then the resident will be willing to pay that cost. If the problem isn't as big as perhaps they initially thought it was, when they're asked to pay a sum of money, then they don't necessarily proceed with that. But it is something that could be done if somebody is experiencing problems with exiting their driveway.
Thank you, Mr. Cargill, and Councillor Duff beat me to that question. Obviously, we had one of the deputations from Mr. Kennedy, I think it was, about the difficulties that he had encountered, and so that's a potential solution for him and any others that are in the same situation to that, by the sound of it. So thank you for that. Councillor Lane, you have a question?
Yes, thanks. I was just prompted by the H-bar discussion there just now. Can officers confirm that that's not an enforceable marking on the road? It's just a guide to people that you prefer not to park there, but the traffic wardens or the police can't enforce that? Or is my understanding incorrect?
Councillor, yes, you're absolutely correct with that. It is an advisory marking, so there is no legal teeth behind that. It can't be enforced, but it is a guide. It is successful in some locations, but in other locations it perhaps hasn't been as successful as you would hope it would be. And at that point, there's nothing really that can be done by Police Scotland or our wardens.
Thank you. I'm assuming we do not have Mr. Fitzpatrick available at the moment, but I am aware that attempts have continued to be made during these proceedings to facilitate an alternative way for Mr. Kirkpatrick to call in or for his words to be communicated. And I understand Baillie Ahern has been in touch with him in that regard. What I'm going to do just now is, before we move on to is it the case, Baillie Ahern, you have a statement at the moment that you could read out? Yeah. Okay. So I think if committee is in agreement, we will go with that approach and ask Baillie Ahern if you would read out Mr. Fitzpatrick's comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. And this is a text from Robert, who is the current chair of the Community Council. Good afternoon, committee members and chair. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk to the committee today. This is not the first time our Community Council has addressed this committee or its equivalent in 2018. The problem back then is the same as the problem now, that free-for-all unregulated parking has caused numerous problems in our area. As evidenced by the police incident numbers and blocked drive and incidents raised at community meetings since 2015. We've got paperwork from 2017 where the great majority of residents in each street agreed and signed to the effect that nuisance parking is a problem, and like other areas nearby, such as Monarch Court and Road, we also like a solution to our situation. But here we are, years later, still waiting. The Channel Tunnel was built faster than PKC plus our councillors have been able to find us a solution. So the object of our recent initiative was to focus explicitly on this problem, again, and to consult and request restrictions. 2 newsletters were distributed in 2022 and views sought on the initiative, and the Community Council letter of support itemises the results of that. Again, consistent with previous results, the great majority of residents were in favour of what was proposed. Single yellow restrictions with, where appropriate, resident parking permits for those with no or insufficient off-road parking for their household. To be fair to all households, the same restrictions would apply in each of the 5 streets: Harley Place, Harley Terrace, Muirton Bank, Muirton Place and Florence Place. That is, single yellow restrictions for specified times and resident parking permits where required. Note that Muirton Place, which had been included from the start, was delayed until a PKC residence parking policy was established. Then a PKC roads officer advised that such a policy was illegal. Then a very recent Freedom of Information request elicited the position that resident parking permits had never been requested, when this had always been central to what was required. As such, it suggested that PKC roads review what is and what's not possible and make that clear to all. The result of the formal PKC survey carried out in August and again in September showed a large number of objectors to restrictions, including those who were not residents but who were still encouraged to object. There are those who benefit from free unregulated parking, and this is precisely the problem we are faced with. Our residential area is seen, first and foremost, as a free parking lot, not a place where our homes and families live, or where we can expect safe, pollution-free community streets. After the results of the PKC consultation, a meeting took place involving 3 of our ward councillors, 2 of whom decided to radically change the proposed TRO there and then, and this was agreed by a 3rd absent ward councillor. A 4th ward councillor formally expressed his objection to changing the original TRO proposal, wishing to leave it there to the committee to decide. So what we have now is a complete mess. 2 streets have single yellows, and we're pleased that the Harleys have achieved this. 2 streets, Florence Place Part and Muirton Bank, have been deleted from the TRO without any communication, let alone consultation from 3 of our ward councillors. Consequently, the paper you're now asked to consider is radically different from that initially proposed and on which details the PKC consultation was based. It is a moot point, therefore, as to whether this proposal you are being asked to consider is even legal, given that it is so different from the consulted on by PKC. That'll be for you to decide. We are pleased that it is still being proposed that our neighbours in Harleys have yellows, but there remain some serious anomalies in the proposal you are being asked to consider. For example, there are near neighbours in Muirton Bank being treated differently. One has asked roads for yellows to be able to exit a driveway, another with the same issue, and police incident numbers as evidence has been ignored despite raising the issue. A road safety problem at the T-junction of Muirton Place and Florence Place, where vehicles are constantly parked across from the T-junction, forcing vehicles to take the corner to drive in the middle of the road, has similarly been ignored. So our community council wants to ask again, can you help us? Why can't we have similar restrictions from the current free-for-all as happens in other areas in Perth? And why is there no dedicated parking for events on the North Inch, unlike the South Inch? Can you please provide some of our ward councillors with ideas to start the process? Because we've been waiting a very long time. And on that note, I should mention that we have had very welcome support from one of our ward councillors, as mentioned in the paper in front of you today, who is willing to step up and deal with the messy problems that are difficult to resolve, but which still need attention. Surely the parameters are in place for such a solution. There's a Scottish Government policy to reduce miles travelled to better achieve net zero. There's PKC's promotion of transport sustainability to enhance health benefits of active travel and to achieve clean air. What's the problem? The clock is ticking, and having mentioned the Channel Tunnel timescale earlier, we hope you can encourage all of our ward councillors to work to achieve a solution in the area they represent before too much longer. That's it, Convener.
Thank you, Bailey Ahern. I have a point of clarification from Councillor Lane.
It's just to check that obviously we can't probe the data or anything from the community council, which is at complete odds with the other deputations we've had today. So I just like to say it's really unfortunate that we can't get into the process by which the community council took a consultation, and any consultation in community council areas I have, they go out and speak to everybody by knocking doors or something like that. And it's unfortunate we can't find of how they got to this position. So I'm just saying it's unfortunate Mr. Fitzpatrick couldn't be here in person or indeed come in online.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Lane. And yeah, I mean, obviously we've had a similar situation with Mr. Grossi, and his comments have been read out but not been capable of being interrogated or challenged by elected members. And unfortunately, as you say, we have the same situation with Mr. Fitzpatrick. It is what it is. You know, the notification was given, and it's just unfortunate that this communication issue has arisen. But we have heard his comments, but as you say, it's not been possible to ask any questions of that particular deputy. But as I say, we are where we are. I now want to, having heard the deputations, had the letter read out, and also listened to the questions and answers given by officers from elected members. I now want to call a brief 5-minute comfort break recess, and we'll resume at 14:45. Thank you. Thank you. I'm now going to move to comments at this stage. I'm looking to hear any comments, and in fact, first of all, we have Councillor Stewart. You have a motion.
Yes, thank you, Convener. Wonder if Committee Services would like to, are able to pop it up on screen. But essentially, the gist of my motion here is to, in terms of the recommendations 2 and 3, to note the Ward 12 elected members' views in paragraph 4.6 and the views of the deputations, and does not set aside the objections, and 3, take no further action in relation to waiting restrictions on the streets concerned. In a former incarnation, I was sitting where you are as convener of the, at that time, Environment, Enterprise and Infrastructure Committee. I had Mrs. Renton sitting next to me, and at that very first meeting back in June 2017, we were discussing the issue of parking restrictions and options for Florence Place. I think the matter came back to the committee 9 months later in March of 2018, following a request that officers do a wider consultation to gain the views of as many people as possible. I don't know how many times it came back to the Environment and Infrastructure Committee in the interim until today. But I think it's clear that there is simply no consensus over the the need for these parking restrictions, and B, between what the response to solve any perceived problems would be. Even some of the deputations, and I just want to thank all of the deputies once again for coming along today. It's really valuable for us to hear directly from communities, and really valuable for us to hear a range of views. But even though some of those deputies who came along today to express support for the proposals in the report said that they weren't happy entirely with the proposals in the report. We've heard a range of views about whether there are issues or are not issues. We've heard a range of views about whether there are problems with emergency vehicles or bin lorries and so on, or whether there are not. We know as elected members that one of the teams that is under the most pressure with the smallest amount of staff to do the largest number of projects, currently sitting somewhere short of a little short of 1,000 in terms of road safety projects across Perth and Kinross, is the team that are sitting at the back of this meeting. And the amount of time that is being taken up on this one single topic where there is no consensus. It's not even that there is no consensus. It's not even that there's a broad consensus likely to be achievable on this topic amongst residents of the area, let alone anything approaching a unanimity or an overwhelming majority of views in response to any single option, means that we are taking up valuable time with a team that have an awful lot of projects to get done across the whole of the Perth and Kinross area for the benefit of all of the residents. I think, therefore, at this point, it is up to this committee to say, no, we are simply going to draw a line. We cannot get a solution which meets with broad general approval of all or most residents in the area, and therefore we need to drop any work on this area going forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion?
I'm happy to second the motion, and particularly want to support the comments made by Councillor Stewart with regards to the resource available from that team and the important work that they're doing throughout Perth and Kinross, specifically related to child safety and pedestrian safety matters. And I say happy to support, happy to second the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Welsh. Can I just check with Democratic Services that the motion is deemed competent? It's confirmed that the motion is deemed competent. Do I have any amendments? Oops, there are no amendments coming forward. So can I approve this motion?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you, committee.
Agreed.
Thank you. Are there any further comments? Thank you. There do not appear to be any further comments, or Councillor Duff? Yeah.
I was just, I think, for everybody's clarity, if we could just confirm what has been moved and agreed. I take it that my interpretation of that is the status quo, so no change to anything that's currently on the ground.
That's certainly my understanding. That's confirmed by the mover of the motion and by Democratic Services. So yeah, the status quo will remain. Okay. Thank you, everybody, and a particular thank you to everyone who has spent a couple of hours in this chamber this afternoon and given us the benefit of their opinions and thoughts. Really much appreciated. Thank you for your time. If you're welcome to stay if you want for the rest of the meeting, but if you're choosing to leave now, can I ask you to do so in the next couple of minutes, and we will just briefly wait until you have done so before we continue with business. Thank you. Thank you also to officers for their time. Thank you. Okay, thanks everyone. Moving on to item 5 on the agenda, which is Local Development Plan 2 Delivery Programme 2019 to 2029. February 24 update. Can I ask Brenda Murray, Development Plans Team Leader, to introduce the report? Thank you.
Apologies, convener. It's actually myself, Ben Wilson, will be doing the introduction, but Brenda Murray and team will be available to answer questions. I'll just briefly outline this. So this is the delivery programme updated version for the current local development plan, which was adopted in 2019. Preparing the delivery programme is a statutory requirement for local authorities. The requirement is set out to prepare and publish a delivery programme at least every 2 years. Can do so more frequently, but it has to be at least every 2 years. The delivery programme sets out how the local development plan is being implemented. It's attached as an appendix to this report. It's quite a lengthy document, and it sets out for policies and for proposals, including site-specific development proposals. It sets out which organisation is leading on delivery of a particular action, the progress in that delivery, whether it's completed or underway, or whether indeed there's been no progress. It's prepared, as outlined in the report, it's prepared through engagement and communication with partners and delivery agents and landowners, as best as we can communicate with them. It should be noted that this is likely to be the last of the old style delivery programmes. This was prepared to accompany the current local development plan under the legislation guidance at that time. So it was based upon the requirements for delivery programmes of that time. As explained in the cover report, the incoming planning system has new guidance about the scope and delivery for delivery programmes, and it's intended that as the team prepares Local Development Plan 3, it will also be preparing the relevant delivery programme for that in a way that's integrated with the content of LDP 3. That's all I want to say, apart from the request is to have this approved today, so it will be adopted as our new delivery programme, and then it will be submitted as required to Scottish ministers in line with legislation. As I say, Brenda and members of the team are available to answer any questions. Thank you, convener and committee.
Thank you very much, Ben, for that report. And as you say, there are a number of officers on standby to answer any site-specific questions and also any general questions. So do members have any questions on the report? The first question I have is from Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Mr. Wilson, for your introduction to the report. I noticed that mention is made in the report, page 420, that about the trunk road network and the necessary upgrades that are required. There's no mention of either, or no real mention made of either environment roundabout or Broxden roundabout. One of the things about I would have thought in the local development plan is that if you're increasing things like houses and industry, you need to make sure that our infrastructure stays up to date. So I'd have thought one of the main things would be to try and stop the huge tailbacks that occur at both these roundabouts, which must have an effect on global warming, because often you see traffic stuck there for up to an hour. So can you say why they weren't specifically mentioned as part of the report?
Provide initial answer, and if necessary, colleagues can supplement. So the local development plan 2 was accompanied by transport appraisal work, which has identified a package of infrastructure measures relating to the transport network. Collective resultant actions are collectively known as the Perth Transport Futures Project, which has several phases, includes Cross Tay Link Road and associated sections of network creation, not just upgrade. So that package of measures is the primary element of transport infrastructure upgrade associated with the growth in LDP2. I'm not, since I wasn't here at the time, I'm not in a position to be able to explain how the transport appraisal, what other options it looked at, but clearly the delivery of the full package of Perth Transport Futures, all phases of it, does have a bearing on certainly environment roundabout. I'll pause now in case there's any colleagues on the call or in the meeting or want to supplement or indeed amend what I've just given as an answer there.
I believe Alistair Finlayson will be able to supplement that.
Just a brief note that Broxden and environment are referenced on page 7 of the appendix, just to say they're not specifically mentioned in the Strategic Transport Projects Review.
Okay, you happy with your answer? Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Braun.
Yes, thanks, Convener. Just following back to the covering paper on section 4.2, we talk about preparing copies for Scottish ministers. 2 copies ago. Do we ever get any feedback from Scottish ministers about our reports and how well we're doing? Do they come back to us?
Mr. Wilson, are you able to answer?
That's never happened in my experience at another local authority. I'll let Brenda answer if that's ever happened for Perth and Kinross. I suspect that their position at Scottish ministers, it's a one-way process in terms of informing them of what's the package of measures needed to support the growth in the LDP. Whether that will be the case in future, I would like to think that there may be more proactive use of information and that the guidance that alluded to in this report, referenced in this report, the guidance on what delivery programmes should have in it, may standardise delivery programmes across Scottish local authorities, and that may allow ministers to then take them as a whole and use that to inform their, their infrastructure planning, their service planning. But that's, I'm speculating on my part. Again, Brenda may be able to say if Perth and Kinross has been fortunate enough to receive a response from ministers.
No, we haven't. Just an acknowledgement that it has been received, but no comment in relation to content, etc. So I think Ben's very much right.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, convener. It was around the list in table 2 of local development plan policy actions. Had a useful meeting a couple of months back with the head of planning and the leader of the council, amongst others, regarding bringing in a policy or supplementary guidance on the topic of battery energy storage systems and renewables, and taking into account in particular, the site selection and cumulative effect of the number of developments that we're seeing. And I wondered whether that needs to be included in either the policy or the list of supplementary guidance, and what the current status of bringing in that policy in advance of LDP3 is.
Yes, I don't think it needs to be included in here because we are already following that discussion. What we're scoping out is a commission for consultants, given the nature of the quite technical and quite fast-changing nature of renewable energy types of development. This is something we think we would want to get some consultancy support for, and we're programming that to be commissioned in the next financial year, so 24-25, and we'd hope to have the results from that coming forward in that same time period in parallel with all the work going on with LDP3. The delivery programme it doesn't need to set that out for that to proceed. We already have some guidance on this, but that was prepared up to a certain point a few years ago, and that would be a starting point for some fresh work. But it would, as I say, things like battery storage and the extent of PV generation installations, it's quite a fast-changing area, so we'd want to refresh that work and have up-to-date consultancy analysis and advice to inform revised, finalised guidance. Does that answer your question?
Yep, thanks, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you. I have Councillor Smith online, and then I have Councillor Anderson and Councillor Duff in the chamber.
Yeah, thank you very much, convener. My question is on the Perth Lade Green Corridor, the Lade Management Plan. Could you give me an up-to-date on that, please? Thank you.
Is that possibly one for Katie Briggs? Katie?
Actually, it's my colleague Andrew Ballantyne who's been, I think, our liaison on this, so maybe pass to him. But I think
okay, good pass. Yeah, okay. Okay, Andrew.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Katie. Thanks for the question. In terms of the Perth Lade Management Plan, it was covers the period 2020 to 25. So in terms of the planning policy, it's there to support any planning decisions in terms of the overall management and successful operation of the Lade. So when the Community Green Space take forward the refresh of the Lade Management Plan, we would expect to be part of that steering group and to advise on any sort of planning implications for that. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Is following up Councillor Robertson's comments on Broxden. It's the major problem. It's not highlighted at all in this document here. We should be taking this opportunity of waking up the Scottish Transport with Broxden. The problems we've had there over the past 6 years have been continuing, getting worse and worse, and nothing's been done about it. I was told 4 or 5 years ago that the Edinburgh Tram problem, that's where the money went for upgrading Broxden. That was from Scottish Transport at one stage, speaking to them. But we should highlight it a lot stronger in this document, because it's going to go to the Scottish Minister. They might read it and wake up to the fact that it's a disaster we've got around Perth. Thank you very much.
So that sounds like a comment rather than a question.
Well, can we include comments? giving strength to the disaster at Broxden.
Mr. Wilson, are you able to comment on that?
Yes, I mean the document before you does make reference to Section 75 agreements seeking contributions towards the cost, not the full cost, but a portion towards the cost of improvements at Broxden. So there is reference there. It does also note Broxden obviously is part of the trunk road network Responsibility Transport Scotland, and there is reference in the delivery programme to STPR2, which stands for Strategic Transport Projects Review 2. So that's the Scottish Government and Transport Scotland's national document for how they prioritise projects and actions. So it's not within the full control of the this authority as local planning authority. It's not wholly attributable to the growth in the local development plan 2. And so therefore there's limited scope to use this as a vehicle to address the issues at Broxden, but there is some reference there to the individually set Section 75 agreements in relation to, for example, Perth West. And so it's, I don't know if that, it doesn't necessarily address the comment, but it's just highlighting the extent to which the delivery programme is not silent on the matter of Broxden and its capacity.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Duff.
Thanks, Convener. Thanks, Ben, for the report. My question is on page 432, and it's to do with conservation areas, and I'm pleased to see that there's an action there to review the conservation areas and the conservation area appraisals, which are due to start, I think, in May. I just wondered how long it might be before that task is completed. And just in further relation to that, further down at 30, it talks about the protection, promotion and interpretation of historic battlefields. And whilst the working group is no longer in place, is it my understanding then that that would be included in the conservation area appraisal part of the document? Thank you.
If I could come in and answer that
Sure.
question.
On you go, Brenda. Yep.
In terms of the review of the conservation areas, you're right when you say that the first one will be brought to council in May. The programme itself, I think we're expecting it will take probably a couple of years, perhaps more, to get through the full review. The initial one's taken a bit of time, just trying to get the framework and template set up for it, but we're hoping from then on we'll be able to proceed at pace going through the remainder. In terms of the battlefields, they wouldn't be incorporated within conservation area reviews. If part of the battlefield was within a conservation area, then clearly that would be. So we will need to look to see how we take that forward through policy as we move forward into the next next LDP.
Thank you, Brenda. I'm not seeing any further questions at this point in time. So can I move on to move the report? The Council is required by legislation to prepare a delivery programme to support its local development plan. The LDP2 delivery programme sets out the actions required to ensure the successful implementation of the policies and proposals contained within the plan and indicates who will be responsible for delivering these. This is the second update to the delivery programme since the adoption of LDP2. Scottish Government guidance indicates that moving forward the delivery programme for the next Perth and Kinross local development plan will play a significantly enhanced role, and its preparation will be integrated with the preparation of the plan itself. It is not considered appropriate or realistic to try to retrospectively prepare a new style delivery programme for the current local development plan, and therefore the update before the committee today is along similar lines to that which has been done previously. This means that elected members and the public can be updated on the progress in delivering the sites and policies in LDP2 without taking staff resource away from preparing the next plan and delivery programme. I'm happy to accept the recommendations in the report and move the paper for approval. Can I ask Councillor Welsh to second the report?
Thank you, Convener. I can confirm I'm happy to second the report.
Okay, thank you. Do members have any comments on the report? And I see Councillor Robertson, you do.
Thank you, Convener. I'm quite happy to support the report, but I do think it's important that infrastructure should go hand in hand with development. And I also think that with things like where we've already got problems, as Councillor Anderson has said, at both Broxden and Inveralmond, then that should be a major thing as part of this report. Section 75s are all very well, but to ask developers to make a contribution which from the developments they take forward is a tiny part of what's needed to actually solve these problems. So I think we should highlight the Scottish Government that major infrastructure things like the trunk road network is their responsibility, and we expect them to come forward and address these matters before we're expected to take a lot more development than the Perth central area. And the two I would highlight most emphatically is both Inveralmond and Broxden. It's an embarrassment when you see people coming here on holiday queuing for hours to get through Broxden on a Friday afternoon. And I think we should send a message out there that we recognise that problem, both there and Inveralmond, and we're going to do our very best to try and put it right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. I'm seeing no further requests to make comment. So if there are no amendments, can we agree the recommendations as set out in the report? Here. Okay, item 6 and the final item on today's agenda is the response to water, wastewater and drainage policy consultation. Can I ask Mark Butterworth, Head of Environmental and Consumer Services, to introduce the report? Mark.
Thanks, Convener. Back in March 22, the Scottish Government's Climate Change Committee set out a series of recommendations identifying key areas where Scotland could make improvements to better adapt to the impacts of climate change. The Scottish Government have subsequently considered the recommendations made by that committee, and as a result, it's issued a consultation which seeks views on how the water industry needs to adapt to the impacts of the climate emergency. Officers have reviewed the consultation paper and have drafted a response, which is in the form of answers to a series of questions, and this is set out at Appendix 2 of the report. And the purpose of the report is to seek elected members' comments on that draft response and subsequent approval to the response. There are a number of officers who have input into the consultation response. It's quite wide ranging, and those officers are online to assist members and to answer any questions. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Mark. Do members have any questions on the report? I have Bailey with a question.
Thank you, Convener. There are 3 or 4 questions in the consultation that are phrased directly to ask about the context of a home as in a domestic dwelling, such as the one about would you know where to find information about your how to save water in your home. What was the reasoning as to why we've answered them as a council? And my specific concern here is, are we maybe adding noise into a important data set by, as a council, answering as if we're a household? Thank you.
Mark, could you reply?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I think it's not great, the consultation, to be perfectly honest, the form, because as you say, it refers to house and homes, and does that mean only for individuals to respond, or whether organisations should respond? I think our colleagues in Housing have responded to some of the questions, as we have obviously a council stock. So we've done our best as officers to interpret the questions and reply accordingly. But I get your point. It is a little bit unclear and quite general in terms of the way it's been drafted.
If I may come in as well, Bailey, my understanding from right at the very beginning, it asks the question of what are you an organisation and whether you're happy for that information to be made known. And we've said we're the council and we're happy to make that for that to be made known. So I'm assuming that when they look at the analysis of that, they will take that into account.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you, Bailey, and Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Convener. I was surprised in the report that there's very little mention of the issues we have in Scotland with Scottish Water dumping raw sewage in our watercourses and lochs in periods of heavy rain. It's sort of intimated that with the attempts to divert rainwater, stormwater from sewage, but there's very little emphasis in the report about that. But it's surely one of the major environmental problems here in Scotland. So could I have a response to that and why it's not emphasised more in the report?
Yeah, I think perhaps Russell Stewart may be able to come in more specifically. I think again, the consultation itself is quite specific. It's not great at all in terms of our interpretation or how we can introduce issues. But if you feel that we need to introduce some more of those issues or respond to that, we can see if we can build that in somewhere. But I think it's very much, as you can see, a lot of the questions are simple yes, no answers with a small comment box in some places. So it's quite restricting and quite uninspiring, to be perfectly honest. But I don't know, Russell, if you've got any comments on that at all.
No, not really. In terms of the actual consultation document that came out, that's obviously been written by Scottish Government. So they've obviously focused on key areas, which I think they're looking at separating out the surface water from the sewer, which will then in turn help reduce those number of dumps into the water environment. So yeah, but that's an aspect that Scottish Water are responsible for, not the council.
Does Robert Lyle have something else to add?
Yes, thanks. Primarily, SEPA would let us know if there's any problems as far as that goes. If there was, Environmental Health would investigate accordingly, but I completely agree with Russell on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, moving on, I'm just, right, with Councillor Stewart, then Councillor Duff. Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Convener. Can I just quickly check if we've got suggested text to go into one of the comment boxes? Can we provide that at this? Do you want that at this stage, or are we still just asking questions?
Still questions at this stage. Okay.
Yeah. So I think my first question. Well, I think my question is on question 3. Then. To what extent do you agree or disagree that everyone in Scotland needs to use less drinking water? The suggested response is agree. Could I understand the thinking behind that?
Interesting question. Anybody prepared to take that one?
Is Robert, is that something that came from your team? I think generally, obviously, the use of less drinking water is less of an impact on climate change, doesn't it? So I think, generally speaking, that the more drinking water used, the more that needs to be processed, etc. So I think that's just simply a comment around, well, the less drinking water, the less impact on the environment, I would say, as a general response.
I think with climate change, there's more rain and more drinking water available. So surely we should be drinking more of it to help solve the problem.
Well, just in terms of that, I think that the consultation doesn't just cover the climate change from a point of view of excessive rainfall. It also covers, periods of drought and when there's limited rainfall. So it's not just aimed at, the experiences in Perth over the last few months around the flooding, etc. It is also at times when rainfall is sparse.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy, is your comment related to this question? It is. Okay, carry on.
I agree with you, Colin. I think it's poorly worded. It probably should say potable water. So that's water that has been treated, which is, for example, used in flushing toilets, etc. Water is one of our most energy intensive industries, and therefore less potable water being used wastefully means improvements and reductions in carbon dioxide reduction. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think Robert Lyle wants to make a further comment.
Yes, thank you. I completely agree with that. I think too it's about potable water, because in the private water world, we clearly want people to be using a bit less water, because in the summertime, we know that these supplies dry up, and a lot of private water supplies or the owners of private water supplies have got to make up their mind whether they want to boil a kettle or have a wash in the morning during the summer.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Duff.
That actually very nicely leads into my question, because it was in relation to the private water supplies. I think it question 13, I think it's in the answer there. It talks about a private water supply grant, and I would certainly like some more information about that, and probably maybe members would in general, and happy to receive it after the meeting. But is this a grant that the council controls? I have quite a few people on private water supplies in my area, and I would like to know a bit more about it. Thank you.
Certainly, I can give all of the information regarding grants. So there is an £800 grant available from the Scottish Government via the council, and that's available to all private water supplies. So the good thing about it is that it's delivered to each property. So if we've got a number of supplies, a number of properties sharing the same supply, we will pay that amount times the 800 for that.
Thank you, that's very helpful. If you could send out certainly some more details on that, I think it'd be welcomed. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay, thank you. Bailey Williamson.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. My question is about question 29, about private water supplies again, I'm afraid. And I just wondered, is it worthwhile including sort of like having more information about two private water supply holders about protecting the water supply, protecting the integrity of that supply, also the potential pollution as well. I know there's been cases previously where people have just been dumping cartridges from motorhomes, and the potential is it could find its way into private water supply. So possibly there's more information that could be given to private water supply holders or users, should I say. The other question is about sewage and the disposal of sewage, because again, not everybody's connected to the private sewage supply. Is it worthwhile considering something like a licensing scheme so that when people are having the septic tanks emptied, it's probably from a reputable person? Finally, page 30, sorry, question 36 is about provide water butts for households and advise how to collect, etc. Doesn't that attract a charge from Scottish Water for the collection of water?
Okay, thank you. Who's able to take these questions?
Just in terms of Councillor Bailey Winston's comments around private water suppliers, absolutely agree. I think we can add that in terms of more advice and guidance to households with private water suppliers. In terms of where the Scottish Water's charging policy, I couldn't provide you with a response, and I don't know if anyone else on the call can. But certainly in terms of the comments, I think we can certainly take them on board around the advice and guidance to private water, to people with private water supplies.
Thank you. And I think Robert Lyle, you've got something else to add again?
Yes, please. It's just to give Councillor Williamson assurances that the private water team is actually looking at amalgamating those checks into that, so we know where who the waste is going to, or who's taking the stuff away from that, because quite often if somebody's on a private supply, they're also in a septic tank, and because they're so far away from everything, and also any other sort of relevant checks that are required. So as Mark says, the private water team will look at doing all of that.
Thank you. Bailey McLaren.
Thank you. Well, my question is in regard to the question 14. Who do you think is the role in changing how we manage rainwater in Scotland? And you've highlighted landowners and farmers. You know, I would just like to get an understanding of where that thought came from, given that there is legislation that sits around, particularly the agriculture industry, to deal with so much of off-run and within their farming business. So, and again, if I could be any assistance within this, I'd be happy to do so.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so just in terms of a general response again, convener, I think that the answer reflects the fact that it's everybody's responsibility to work together in partnership. I think in terms of landowners and farmers, I think we've seen how important it is. So again, recently some experiences around managing the water that runs off onto the public highway, for example. So again, it's just more about the fact that we all need to work together in terms of addressing some of these issues. Don't know, again, Russell, have you got anything further to add?
No, just the same points as what you just said there. I mean, in terms of landowners, yeah, we've mentioned it earlier on with how they want Scottish Water are looking for them to disconnect their curtilage water, so their roof water, from the sewerage system, so that it, you know, reduces or increases the capacity in the sewer, so that it doesn't flood as often. And then in terms of the farmers, it's just more around the practices when their fields have been harvested and then there's heavy rainfall, the runoff and silt, which I know they do have kind of 3 metre strips or whatever from water courses that they try and implement. But yeah, it's just like you said, working together, and everybody's got a role to play.
Thank you. Councillor Kilgallen and then Councillor Robertson with your second question.
Hi, just going back to the point made about drinking water, and I do appreciate that clarification that we're not asking people to drink less water, but whether it be possible to actually include that on the submission itself and just make really explicit that that's not what we're asking, because that is, especially to somebody that's not an expert in water, that is exactly how it reads, and I don't think that's something we should be suggesting.
Yeah, so are we able to make that?
Yeah,
slight
no,
amendment?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, convener.
Yeah, okay, thank you. No, point made, Councillor Kilgallen, thank you for that. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, convener. Question 22. To what extent do you agree or disagree that more should be done to stop items being disposed of down toilets and drains? Can I just suggest that we say strongly agree? I know it's terrible. Strongly agree rather than agree, because it is important that we don't encourage people to put the wrong things down the toilet.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you. On you go. Mark, were you saying something?
Happy to make that change, convener.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Anderson.
in question 20, but it leads on to as such. You've got quite an extensive answer as such. Legal duty Scottish Water to manage internal external property flooding due to surface water and internal sewer flooding. In England, I think most of the water boards will have to announce if they have flooding, you know, if the sewage is discharged into the river course or something else, they have to announce that, make it public knowledge. Scottish Water's got away with not making it public knowledge for many years. Is that included in the proposals indirectly? I'm not sure. There was some talk about it in government circles that we're going to start making Scottish Water to release it. I don't know, is that on the boards just now?
Mark, are you able to answer anything?
I think maybe Russell can help with that one at all.
I'm afraid not. No, it's obviously Scottish Water's responsibility under the Sewerage Act to deal with the sewage and any kind of, you know, dumping of it within the watercourses through their CSOs. But yeah, I mean, we could put it in the response that's something that should be looked at as part of it for sure.
Yeah, and the other one, just Councillor Kagali's comment. I've been advised to keep drinking lots of fresh water. For my health purposes, just to keep the circulation going and reduce my coffee consumption, everything else, to drink fresh water. That should be pushed more, not the decrease of my consumption, please, should be encouraged.
Yeah, thank you for these comments. I don't think that was a question, but yeah, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to, if there are no further questions, which I don't think there are, I'm going to move the report. Addressing the impact of climate change is an extremely important matter, and adopting a partnership approach with all stakeholders is vital. We've all seen the devastating effects firsthand here in Perth that flooding can have on residents, properties and businesses, but of equal importance is having a healthy supply of drinking water to our residents in times of very low rainfall. We all have a key role to play in this, particularly the water industry, and I welcome the opportunity for this council and this committee to be able to feed back its views as part of this consultation, which could ultimately lead to the introduction of new legislation. I'm happy to accept the recommendations in the report as amended, as discussed by elected members, and move the paper for approval. Can I ask Councillor Welsh to second the report, please?
Thank you, Convener. I'm happy to second the report.
Thank you. Do members have any comments on the report? We have Councillor Robertson and then Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Convener. I'm actually pleased that as a council we're doing a little bit to try and avoid people drinking water by supplying water but no ways of accessing it, no cups. So that's a really good way to go forward. A Conservative MP wrote recently, just the other day there, that in periods of heavy rain she advised people not to flush their toilets because the likelihood is what goes down the toilet is going to end up in a water course or a river of some sort. That's the situation that applies currently in Kinross and Milnathort and also in many other parts of Scotland. SEPA Scottish Water is licensed by SEPA to dump sewage in watercourses in periods of heavy rain. So Scottish Water are doing nothing wrong in doing that. It's part of their license. I think we should make it clear in our response to this, and there was no opportunity as part of the questionnaire for us to do it. I understand that the officers in a difficult position. The questionnaire looked as if it had been made up by a 10-year-old, but there's no opportunity to do it. But if it can at all be done, I would appreciate if it could be emphasised this council's concerns about the activities of Scottish Water abetted by SEPA, allowing raw sewage to be dumped in our waterways. Because I think above all, we should try and protect our environment. It's not just what goes in, it's what goes out that's important. So I'd appreciate it if that could be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Stewart.
Thanks. I've got a couple of quick points and then a longer point. So just to note that in question 31, the answer is exactly the same as question 29, and I wondered whether it might have just been copied and pasted mistakenly, because it's not adding anything by repeating the information. And in question 36, part of the response says consideration of how to incentivise keeping gardens green and turning into driveways concrete areas which deter. So I think it should say instead of turning into driveways concrete areas. But the thing that I really want to address is I think the appropriate place to put this suggested additional text would be in response to question 20. I'll just read it out quickly for the benefit of members who aren't in the chat. An additional bullet point suggestion that a legal duty should be placed on CEPA around flood risk to update the 0.5% 1 in 200 year flood event risk areas and frequency, taking into account wherever possible the benefit of local knowledge, since local authorities rely on CEPA flood risk maps when considering particularly major planning applications. In the interim, to permit local authorities to place greater weight on local knowledge in the planning process where that is at odds with CEPA flood risk assessments. The point I'm trying to drive at here is that we get lots of planning applications coming to committee, particularly major applications, where locals know that there is sodden ground, that there is that there are boggy areas, that there are flood risks, and those concerns are not taken into account during the planning process if those areas don't show up on CEPA's flood risk maps. And CEPA's flood risk maps don't even show all of the areas where there is a flood risk, because local residents are sitting looking out of their windows, looking at where the water is flowing, looking at where the water is landing, looking at where the puddles are. And they're also seeing those areas flooding, even the 0.5% or so-called 1 in 200 year areas, year events. They're seeing those happening, back in October 3 times in a month in some areas. So the reliance which our planning authorities place on local knowledge is subverted by the CEPA flood risk assessments, which are out of date and visibly out of date in terms of both location and frequency and quantity of flooding. And locals know this, but that information is not able to be captured in the planning process, as a consequence of which we can then go on to approve major planning applications in areas which locals know are totally unsuitable, but which there is no break on in the planning process because we don't have those up-to-date assessments. So my suggestion here is simply that we request that a duty is placed for CEPA to update, and that local authorities can take greater cognizance of local knowledge in planning where that's at odds with CEPA's assessments. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a good points I think you make there, Councillor Lane.
I just wanted to have chatted with Colin about this, Councillor Stewart, and I agree with him totally. The desktop sort of analysis that CEPA does is not often in reality what happens on the ground, and I would make the plea that we ask CEPA to update and their records or their modelling, and that our planning team can take on board local knowledge, because at the moment we're liable to make some bad decisions. And it works the other way around, because there are areas that are on the flood map that never flood. So some people can't develop land that has never flooded. So I wholeheartedly agree with the previous comment by Councillor Stewart, and I agree with Councillor Robertson about the amount of effluent being pushed in around the British Isles, where it's even in much larger quantities. And you see the pictures out of sea. It has to be looked at across the UK about how we disperse with our sewage. And a lot of that is investment in infrastructure. It's needed right across the board, because and even in Perth, we see what's happening. We're busy using Victorian drainage systems. Thanks.
Thank you for that comment. And Councillor Welsh.
Again, I echo and agree with what Councillor Stewart has said, and Councillor Lang. Specifically, I think we shouldn't necessarily wait. There's pragmatic action we can take just now, while absolutely supporting that review of the 1 in 200 flood event risk. But what we can do just now, and indeed there have been calls for this already, is to use people power, to use essentially the fact that most people now have smartphones to record video footage, photographs, and that can be incorporated in data files, which I understand Perth and Kinross Council currently use, called GIS, which essentially can capture that data and hold it as part of the potentially infrastructure planning and planning approvals. So there is actions we can take at the moment that captures that people power, and I think we would get a lot of respect from our population to be meaningfully using that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Bailey McLaren.
Yes, just very briefly. I'm concurring slightly with Councillor Stewart, but I do agree with Councillor Lang's observations that, you know, sometimes SEPA will tell us that we've got a 1 in 200 year risk, and equally local knowledge could give strong defence against that. So I would agree with the statements. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm not detecting any opposition from within the committee to what has just been said by Councillors Stewart, Lang, Welsh and Bailey McLaren. So I'm minded to incorporate that rather than going through the formal amendment process. I'm minded to incorporate the comments that are in the chat, which I can just read out just for the record to incorporate this. A legal duty should be placed on SEPA around flood risk to update 0.5% brackets 1 in 200 year flood event risk areas and frequency, taking into account wherever possible the benefit of local knowledge, since local authorities rely on SEPA flood risk maps when considering particularly major planning applications. In the interim, to permit local authorities to place greater weight on local knowledge in the planning process where that is at odds with SEPA flood risk assessments. On the basis of that being added into the report, can we agree the recommendations as set out in the report?
Convener, just to clarify in terms of the your motion that incorporates the comments from Councillor Stewart, I assume what we're saying is that the council is requesting in relation, obviously the council doesn't have the ability to place the legal duty on SEPA. So is the wording that the council is asking Scottish Government to to look into this, rather than obviously the council can't specifically place this on SEPA itself?
Yep, so exactly that, but I copied the sort of form of wording from 3 bullet points above, where the suggested response was a legal duty should be placed on Scottish Water to manage internal and external property flooding due to surface water. So I just copied the same form of words.
Thank you, and Director Renton.
I also wonder if committee is minded to take into account the points that Councillor Anderson and Councillor Robertson were making in relation to Scottish Water being made to tell, sort of if they are causing sewage issues. And it's not me. If we cannot find a place within the actual consultation document, what I would recommend is we just in our covering email, sort of when we attach that, just to say this is the view of Perth and Kinross Council.
Just for clarity, that didn't include the part about we had to drink more water.
No.
Not that part of the
Not that part, but we will also change that particular element to say about potable water rather than drinking water.
Thanks.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor Lee. So can we agree the recommendations are set out in the report and as amended, as just discussed? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to the end of business on the agenda, and just before we all go, can I just briefly place on record the fact that not only this young lady to my left, Director Renton, but also Mark Butterworth online, this is their last meeting of this committee before they depart for either pastures new or pastures. Yeah. So I would just like to take this opportunity to thank both Barbara and Mark for their service to Perth and Kinross Council over decades, yeah, thank you both for everything that you have done and continue to do. Obviously, the departures will be marked as appropriate, and there will be another opportunity for elected members to have a say to make comments at upcoming full council meetings. With Barbara's prior agreement, I would not suggest that she makes any comments today, although she's welcome to if she wants to. I can't stop her. But to wish her all the very best for her well-deserved retirement when it comes.
Eric.
Councillor Lee.
Apart from Councillor Robertson here and maybe Councillor Williamson, I'd like to place on record how much we'll miss Barbara in this committee and all her other roles across the council and the service she's given. She's always been a formidable friend and opponent when things have needed done, and we've had many, I'm sure everybody's had many interesting discussions with her to try and get to a point that's best for all the residents of Perth and Kinross. But I think that's where Barbara's heart has lain for all the time she's been here. It's doing her best for the residents of Perth and Kinross, in spite of elected members, ways of maybe not achieving that. So I'm sure we'll all look forward to having a proper chance to say a goodbye to Barbara. But it's just to say, from us as an administration and everybody across here, thanks very much for all the work you've done. And Mark, although you've been here a shorter time, you've been very available to us, and we've enjoyed working with you as well. So thank you.
I think we'd all like to raise a glass, but of course not water, today to both of them. So thank you everyone for your attendance today and for all your contributions, and I now formally close the meeting. Thank you.